Hello and welcome again to That Catholic Saints Guy. I'm your host, Brian O'Neill. Today I'm especially excited because we are going to discuss an absolutely extraordinary woman, the first Black lay woman to be offered for canonization here in the United States, the first former slave who is a female to be offered for possible canonization here in the United States. And so you're going to just be really edified by this woman's life because she did, although she had no education, she couldn't read, she couldn't write. One source I saw said she couldn't even count, but she did not let any of those, what we would consider handicaps, hold her back from modeling Christ, which is what saints do. And joining me is Mary Leisring, the president and director of the Julia Greeley Guild. That's who we're talking about today, Julia Greeley. And Mary, welcome. Thanks for sharing your time with us this afternoon.
Well, thank you, Brian, for having me on your show.
Oh, I'm delighted.
Always
Absolutely
a pleasure
delighted.
to talk about Julia.
Fantastic. So tell us a little bit about yourself first.
Sure. The Guild started in 2011. And we've started just trying to get people to be aware of Julia here in Denver, Colorado. And then the next thing we knew, Archbishop Aquila decided to present her name to the USCCB to be in the process of canonization. And that's where we are now. She is at the cathedral, the Basilica here in Denver. Her remains. She was at Mount Olivet, and we had the honor and the pleasure of removing her remains from there. And now she's in a sarcophagus at the cathedral. And what's so neat about that, with her being a lay person, there's no bishop, no cardinal, no one is in the cathedral except Julia. And that's quite a feat for Denver, around, and we're really excited about her cause.
Absolutely. Well, if you go around to churches in Europe and other places around the world, you'll see tombs everywhere. You can't walk from one pew to the next very often without stepping on someone's grave, essentially. And and that's not very common in American churches. And yet this has happened in Denver. And like you said, not for a cardinal, not for a bishop, not for a priest or a woman religious, but for a simple lay woman who just did in amazing ways, really imaged Jesus Christ.
Basically, she, for someone that was illiterate, she walked the streets of Denver, dragging a little red wagon behind her, where she collected coal and goods, or anything that she had heard that someone needed. And because of the kind of person she was, she never wanted to embarrass anyone. So she would deliver these things at night, and she would have maybe a young person and put them on the doorstep and knock on the door, but run so no one would see them, because she never wanted to embarrass anyone. And you can imagine in those times having a Black person give you something, you didn't want your neighbors to know that. So she never wanted to do anything that would embarrass anyone.
It's unfortunately,
and she walked the streets of Denver.
Unfortunately, what it reminds me of, what the image it brings to mind, is Cleavon Little in Blazing Saddles, where the woman brings him a pie but says, you'll have the good decency not to mention this to anyone, I hope. Yes, unfortunately, those were the times. Tell us your story. Where was she born? How was she raised? How did she come to Colorado?
Well, she was born in Hannibal, Missouri. And after her birth there, she was freed by the Missouri Legislative Emancipation Proclamation. So they were basically the emancipators for her, was the Missouri legislature, not the one from Abraham Lincoln that a lot of the Black slaves in the South were freed. And after working for the Pratts in St. Louis, Missouri, she came to Denver because Mrs. Pratt had a sister here, and her name was Julia Gilpin. And so she worked for the Gilpins, and the Gilpin, he was he was the first territorial governor for Colorado. And so she worked for the Gilpins, and Mrs. Gilpin was a very faithful Catholic. And so she started talking to Julia about Catholicism, and Julia became a Catholic. And not only did she become a Catholic, but she's also a secular Franciscan. And so she attended meetings at St. Elizabeth's Church for the secular Franciscan meetings, but her membership was at Sacred Heart Church, which is still downtown Denver on Larimer. And she was a daily communicant. She went to Mass every day. And we have a cute story about her where there was, you know, she didn't have fancy clothes or anything like that, where one lady in the parish talked to the priest and said, Father, she comes every day. She sits in front of the Sacred Heart statue. Her clothes are tattered, and, you know, that doesn't present very well. And so maybe she shouldn't do that. And Father says, well, I'm not asking Julia to leave. And if it bothers you, maybe you should leave. And so so Father is very, was right on. And because he said that she was one of his proudest daily communicants. I mean, because she was there every day. And if you asked her, like, well, what'd you have for breakfast or something like that? And she says, well, Holy Communion was breakfast. So she was already living the gospel out long before anyone thought of her canonization.
So she's born a slave in Hannibal, Missouri, as far as we can tell. And so how old was she when she was emancipated?
Well, we don't have all those dates, you know, because back then they didn't keep dates on people that were enslaved. We don't even have a birth date for her. But we do know that she did die on June 7th, 1918. But I would think she was definitely an adult when, you know, when she was emancipated, because then she left there and went to Missouri to work as a domestic for the Pratt family.
Now, I had heard something that she had been in Wisconsin at some point. Is that the truth, or is that just one of those legends?
I know that well, it's hard to think of all the places. I know she was in, I think, Wyoming for a while, but we don't have all the records. See, that's another problem with people that are enslaved. People just don't keep good records. The main thing that we have here is Father Blaine's book, where he's done extensive work on her. It's not a biography, but it's chronological as he found out things. He published in Secret Service of the Sacred Heart, The Life and Virtues of Julia Greeley. So we do have that book for sale if, you know, if there are people that want to read more about Julia. But we do have a new book that the children at Annunciation Church wrote about Julia, and they wrote the book themselves and did the illustrations and everything. And these are eighth graders. So we're very proud of the young people at Annunciation for doing this.
That's fantastic. Now, she comes to Colorado as in the employ of the Gilpins.
Yes.
Was she employed by them for the rest of her life after that point?
Well, she was there for a long time, and the Gilpins ended up going to court and everything, and they tried to discredit Julia because the territorial governor was saying that Julia was coming between he and his wife, but that wasn't true. And so, you know, she did domestic work all over the city. So, and I think you've probably seen the picture of the one that we only have really of her with the child, the little we call it the white angel.
Right.
And what happened was she was passing by, and this lady asked her if she would be willing to do some domestic work for her. And she said yes. So she went into the lady's home, And she could tell by seeing probably crucifixes and different things that the lady was Catholic. And so she said, but you don't have any children. And so the lady said, yes, as I can't have children. And so Julia says, well, by this time next year, you will have a child. And that's who is on the picture with Julia. It's the little girl that was born to this family.
Now, did that little girl, after she grew up, did she leave any sort of testimony about Julia? Do we know
Well,
anything
we
about
do
her?
know that the Urquhart's family and Father Blaine has done research with the family and everything about that. And
Okay.
so there is some information that we have regarding that information. But that's the only photo that we had of Julia until someone else did I guess you'd call like a drawing or a print where someone has done another photo. But the actual photo of Julia and the little girl, that's the only one we have.
Well, thank God we have even that. I mean, a lot of people never,
Yes, for
that
sure. Yeah,
socioeconomic status never had a picture taken of themselves in their lives.
exactly.
Which is so hard for us today, selfie or something,
Yeah,
every 2
everybody's
seconds.
right. Because everybody has a phone, so everybody's doing selfies and different things, but not back then.
Right.
But one of the other virtues that Julia had was that every first Friday, she would go to the firehouses and she would take pamphlets uh, to the firefighters. Because she said that she always wanted them to be prepared if anything happened to them.
Yeah, she had a
So
real devotion to firefighters, I understand.
she
Why
did.
was that?
I think she was the kind of person that felt like that these were people that were doing something uh, heroic and good for the common good, and so she took a liking to them, and we're hoping that if she becomes a saint, that maybe she'll become the patroness for firefighters. So we kind of that's sort of in the back of our minds. We don't know what the Pope will do, but because she did have, and there had been a fire here in Denver where some of the firefighters lost their lives, and so that I think that was part of her drive, so to speak, to make sure that they got these pamphlets. And they do have a museum, a firefighters museum, where at different times they have honored Julia with different things in their museum, which is really a tribute to her.
Absolutely. Now, what drove her devotion to the Sacred Heart?
Well, I think when she became a Catholic and being in the family, working for the family of the Gilpins, I think that when she went to Sacred Heart, to be able to sit right in front, that was the statue that was right in front. It was the Sacred Heart. So she became a devotee to the Sacred Heart. And that's where she sat every day. And we find it that it's sort of divine providence that she died on the Feast of the Sacred Heart. So we try every year to honor her in some way with a mass or a celebration on as close to the Feast of the Sacred Heart as possible. That we have a mass and a celebration.
Do we know anything about her faith life before she became Catholic? Was she?
No, we do not.
Okay,
We
so
do
it's kind of
not.
a mystery prior to her becoming
Right.
Catholic and moving to Denver. It's kind of a mystery. One thing I wonder if you've come across in your research, many people will recognize Hannibal, Missouri, where she was born and spent the first few years of her life, as the town in which Samuel Clemens was born and raised, and who became
Right.
better known, Mark Twain. So,
Right.
do we have any evidence that the two passed one another, knew
We
one
don't,
another,
but
or anything?
no, we don't. But we also think that, Augustus Tolton was also around Illinois and everything as well. So we think that there may have been a possibility that their paths crossed as well. But because they didn't keep, really good records, we don't have that definitive that, but just because of the years involved, we would think that there may have been some meeting somewhere, or someone knowing about the relationships that she had with other people, like Mark
So,
Twain and Father Augustus Tolton.
I mean, it would just be fascinating to know that if, because Hannibal was not a big town, so
No,
it's
that's
likely that at least they would have maybe crossed paths. But even in a small town, people don't know each other, so who knows?
that's true. True.
So she
Because
comes
we've
west. Oh,
even
go
gone
ahead. Sorry.
back to the we've even gone back to the hospital, where we think that possibility maybe she worked there or something, but we haven't been able to find anything.
Hmm.
We have found that we think is the plantation where where she was enslaved, but
Hmm.
we still don't have that definitive as well, because they just don't keep records, like we keep records now.
Now she lost her right eye when she was a slave, didn't she? What
Yeah,
happened there?
well, the slave master was beating her mother with a whip, and Julia, was trying to protect her mom, and so the tip of the whip caught her eye, and so she was blinded in that eye, and it oozed a lot. Uh, and a lot of people would say, she wasn't an attractive person, maybe on the outside, but she was a beautiful person on the inside.
That's awesome. So she comes west with the Gil to serve the Gilpins, work in their household.
Mhm.
And under Mrs. Gilpin's influence and I guess just the attractiveness of her own faith, maybe she becomes a Catholic
Right.
herself.
Yes.
What do we know about? I mean, she's a daily communicant. She's doing the corporal works of mercy.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about her life as a Catholic, her devotions, other than, because we've already spoken a little bit about the Sacred Heart, but maybe there are others. I mean,
Well.
so for instance, in that one picture you mentioned,
Hmm.
she and the baby are both holding a rosary, which I find so
Right.
endearing.
Right.
So just, tell
Yes.
us a little bit about her life as a Catholic, if you would, please.
The fact that she became Catholic and then became a secular Franciscan, says a lot to the virtues of her faith, because, she still wanted to do something monthly when they met. And she was buried in her Franciscan robe. So that's another testament to her faith. But the neat thing about Julia, is that the fact that I think that even back when she lost her eye, no one can ever say, in the information that we've received, that she ever said anything negative about anyone. That she was always an upbeat person and was always trying to help people. Um, there were young girls that didn't have nice dresses to go to proms or special events, and she would beg for dresses from the rich, so she could give those dresses to people that didn't have them. So she was always doing, like you said, corporal works of mercy, and not, expecting anything or receiving anything. It was just something that she felt called to do. So she didn't write any books, so we don't have anything that we can say, well, she believed this or she believed that. But we feel like that all of her beliefs were turned into action. She may not have had books written or papers or anything like that, but if you study the life that she lived, she was living the gospel out every day.
And
And
it's
that's a
amazing.
tribute to her.
For me, it's amazing because I know that when I have a dry prayer life, for instance, when I find my prayer life getting dry,
Hmm.
very often what I'll do is I'll go read out of these old prayer books, which kind of gives a kickstart to my prayer life at that moment. Or I'll pick up the Gospels and I'll do, some reading from the Gospels or from one of the New Testament epistles, or I'll just play Bible roulette and flip to a page and just start reading from
Right.
there. And these are the sorts of things, at least for me, and I know from others, that help so can kindle the relationship that we have with Jesus Christ. And the amazing thing is she didn't have access to these things because she couldn't read,
No.
and she couldn't write.
Right.
So what is it, do you think, what made her so in love with Jesus?
Well, I would think that Mrs. Gilpin was a good role model for her, and would think that Mrs. Gilpin probably talked to her about different stories in the Bible. And of course, she would get things also from her Franciscan meetings as well. Uh, but I think that, some people are just divinely touched by God in such a special way. And for her to come every day and sit in front of the Sacred Heart and pray, that she was being fed somehow through that. And so some of us that have the opportunity to read, or like you say, rekindle our prayer life, we have no excuses when we think of someone like Julia that doesn't have that or didn't have that to do to rekindle in the sense that we would. So she has a lot of virtues, and she's the kind of person that you hear young people say, well, we don't have any role models anymore, but we do. We have Julia, and you can't find a better role model than Julia Greeley.
What amazes me about,
because she cared.
Oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, I was just saying she cared for people no matter what their race was or what their status in society was. It didn't matter to her. If they were in need and she could help, she would do it. There's one picture of her carrying a mattress on her back because she had heard that someone needed a mattress or bed. So she would take coal to people that needed coal for fires. So she always did things that, like I said, we have no excuse for helping our neighbor because she did it all the time.
And it's not like she was a middle-class woman or a wealthy woman, and
No.
she was she was impoverished, wasn't she?
It was poverty, right? She was, and yet she gave whatever she had. In fact, I think the Gilpins had she had a burial plot at Mount Olivet, and she gave it away to someone because she felt like they needed it more than she did. So she was always giving.
That's a tremendous trust. Yeah, that's a tremendous trust in divine providence. I read that she made between $10 to $12 a month, which, we have a hard time understanding because we don't have, it's dollars, money isn't worth now what it was back then and vice versa. So I put those numbers through in several inflation calculators. At the most, the money was worth $375 a month, which, even considering that there was that we needed, that things were cheaper back then, as in many cases they were, housing wasn't as expensive, she nonetheless was not making a huge income.
No. And she always gave. If she had something and someone needed something, she would give. So she would take things from herself to give to other people. So that's what I mean about her selfless giving, that she was always thinking of others. It didn't matter, about herself as much. She just felt like that, if you want to say that she was an apostle, she was, and she actually did what the Gospels, tell us to do, that we are our brother's keeper. And she showed that in her daily life.
What I also find remarkable is that so many of us act as though we were, or we are afraid that the authorities will come and arrest us if we share our faith. And it's one of these things that we are commanded to do, go make disciples of all the nations.
Right.
but yet sharing that good news of salvation in Jesus Christ and the graces that we can get
Yeah.
through Holy Mother Church and our devotions to the saints and the sacramentals that she offers us and all these other wonderful tools that the Holy Catholic Church gives us. We're afraid to share this incredible news, and yet she was not. She was fearless, wasn't
She
she?
was not. No, yeah, she was.
Can you
Yeah,
give us some
and
examples of how
I
she
think
did that?
that's well. I think the prime example would be what she did with the firefighters, and taking them the pamphlets. But I would presume that Julia, anybody that wanted to talk to her about her faith, I think that she would be willing to do that. She'd be willing to do that. And I think you're right. Some of us shy away from talking about our faith because we don't want to be pigeonholed or say, oh, this person does this or says this. But she didn't have those fears. She didn't have those reservations that some of us have in talking about our faith. That she was such an example of just being a daily communicant, and to think that she had to walk everywhere that she went. And some of us that have cars have problems getting to mass, but she made sure that she got to mass every day. So just those kinds of examples that we know about her, and how much she loved children. She would take the streetcars and take a bunch of children to City Park. And one time the conductor asked her, "So are these your children?" She's, all of these are my children, no matter. So they were white, black, it didn't matter to her because she loved children. So she would just say, "These are my children." So not only did she give to adults, but she also gave to children.
It seems to me that she's the ideal saint in that she does what all saints really do, which is to do the ordinary things of life in extraordinary ways. And that's what we're called to do
Right.
as Christians. It also seems to me that she is a perfect example of what St. Paul writes about in First Corinthians, namely that God has chosen and Our Lady mentions this in her Magnificat. God has chosen the humble,
Right.
the folks who are not wise in the eyes of the world, to humble the mighty and to really show them the true what things are truly valuable and what will give them everlasting happiness. So, what is it that what observations do you have in light of some of those things like we read about in the Magnificat in First Corinthians?
Well, for me, she's a role model for me.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm not exactly sure if I would have been possibly as reserved as she was if someone was beating my mom and I lost an eye. Um, and obviously she had to be a forgiving person to be able to carry on and do the kinds of things that she did. And yet, like I said before, we'd never have heard anyone say that she ever said anything negative about anyone. And to be enslaved, I'm sure she had scars and times in her lives when people didn't treat her as a person, uh, and yet that didn't seem to hold her back for carrying out the gospel. That she apparently had the love for people, no matter what their conditions were. And being an enslaved person, I'm sure she understood possibly better than others what it meant to be oppressed and what it meant to not to have certain things. And yet she was always willing to give whatever she had. So she was always wanting to make it better for the next person.
That's awesome.
And and that's the gospel. That's the gospel. We are our brother's keeper, and we are supposed to take care of each other and look out for each other and help each other, pray for each other. And even though she didn't beat her right, I would be willing that even the lady that didn't want her in the church, he probably prayed for that lady, because
Probably.
that's the kind of person she was.
What was her, we obviously have a lot of issues still with race in our country.
Right. Hmm.
Uh, what was her experience with racial prejudice? Do we know?
Well, if the fact that she was enslaved meant that she was obviously treated differently. So, and the fact that a slave master was beating her mom with a whip, so she didn't experience uh, dignity and acceptance, especially as when she was enslaved. And I
Mhm.
think that in working for the Pratts and the Gilpins, that they probably did treat her better than she was treated when she was enslaved. But still, she was not, quote, a member of society, so to speak. And yet that didn't seem to hold her back from trying to give to others. She didn't say, to me, it seems like she wasn't a person that thought a lot about herself, that she was selfless, that she was always thinking about others. And I think if you live a life of thinking about others, that you are blessed and you are graced. And I think that's what she received from our Lord. She was blessed, no matter how she looked or what clothes she wore, or the fact that she walked or she was illiterate, but that she was still blessed in so many ways that um, some of us probably couldn't even understand some of the ways that she was blessed, because we
Probably.
don't measure things the way she probably measured things.
Now, the hub of, from what I understand, the hub for activity for secular Franciscans in Denver at the time was St. Elizabeth of Hungary Parish. And that's where a priest named Father Leo Heinrichs, who I write about in 39,
Right, he was martyred.
150 North
Yeah,
America.
he was
In fact,
martyred
he's,
there.
yeah, right there. Exactly.
Yeah.
Do we know about their relationship or whether they even knew each other? Because they were there at the same time. He was started being there, what, in 1907? She died in 1918. So what
Right.
do we know about their
I
relationship?
would think
Anything?
they no, but I would think that if he was there and she was there, that they had, I would say, a very Christian relationship. And that reading what I've read about Father Heinrich, that he must have been in awe, like a lot of people are in awe of Julia, to find someone that didn't go to Catholic schools and, didn't go to Catholic, have the bringing, wasn't a cradle Catholic, so to speak. And yet she had the virtues that we all would like to have and we all strive for,
Yeah, she's
of
this woman
being
who,
better,
go ahead.
better person, to be a better person. And I think that she was always exhibiting that.
She has, she must have had some formation because they wouldn't have received her into the church without first a period
Well,
of
I'm sure
preparation and
she had,
formation. But there's,
right. I'm sure that when she became a member of Sacred Heart, I'm sure that there was some formation there
but
for her to be even a member of parish. Hmm.
right, and they
And she
probably
may
taught
have
her.
gotten, hmm
I'm sorry,
she
they
may have received that from Gilpin.
so
Miss Gilpin may have been her sponsor. Hmm.
very likely. The what I find remarkable is the fact that she was so well formed. Most of us, I've spent the last 25, 30 years or so trying to become better formed in my faith.
Hmm.
And I have the benefit of all of modern multimedia tapes, videotapes, CDs, DVDs, books, you name it. And yet her formation in terms of her love of Christ, her love of the Eucharist, her wanting to love Christ in others exceeds anything that
Hmm.
I've even been able to touch. And
Yeah, and yeah, it does. And that's why I think that, um, we see that at least the guild and the people that know about Julia see no reason why she wouldn't be a saint, uh, because she has exhibited everything that um, the other saints that we know about exhibited, and a lot of them's formation, some of them were religious. She was secular, but their formation was different, and they had years and years of study, and she didn't have that. So that's why, for me, I feel like that she was, even when she was enslaved, that she was somehow touched by the Lord, that He was going to make sure that Julia would be a person that would exhibit the Gospels, to show all of us that you don't have to be wealthy, you don't have to, go to Notre Dame and get a degree, or you don't have to do all of these things that we think we have to do um, to be formed. And here's a lady that didn't have any of that, and yet was more informed in her faith. So we have no reason not to see her as an example and a person that we would like to be like, and for her to be a role model for a lot of people.
Absolutely. Now, if people want to learn more about Julia and the work that you're doing toward her beatification, where do they go?
Well, we have a guild, of course, and they can go to Julia Greeley Guild at gmail.com if they want to write and request anything. If they want to go to our website, it's www.juliagreeley.org. So the website, www.juliagreeley.org. And if they want to write, because we also have a canoe of intentions for people that they want to send in, and we call it Julia's Canoe, and we put all the prayer intentions in it. So each month when we have the masses for Julia, then we pray for those intentions. So people can send intentions to juliagreeleyguild@gmail.com.
That's fantastic. Mary, thank you so much for being with us today. I really, really appreciate your time. And folks, thank you for joining us here on That Catholic Saints Guy. By all means, if you like this, share it with others. Hit that little subscribe button down below. Give it a thumbs up. Support us on Patreon if you can. And in the meantime, try to be saints here. Let's try to be saints ourselves. Thanks so much for joining us. And we'll see you next time on That Catholic Saints Guy.